Anthony Black is one of the most complex prospects in the 2023 NBA draft. This is Floor and Ceiling, let's break him down. At 6'7", Anthony Black has great size and really interesting athleticism as a playmaker all over the floor. Let's start at the rim. At first glance, Black doesn't look like the most powerful athlete, but I think he's actually one of the more dangerous straight-line drivers in this year's draft class. Black isn't quick twitch in short spaces, but it's very hard to stop his combination of height, handle, and momentum once he gets rolling. The Arkansas standout is scoring a little under 13 points per game, and almost half of his shots come right at the basket. As we'll dive into, Arkansas' spacing was rough this season, but Black was still getting to the rim a lot. This is the type of volume that you love to see, and you have to think it will eventually go up even more once he has NBA spacing to work with. We were seeing this at times whenever Black got a high screen, and then he was able to drive into plenty of space. Black is self-creating these looks at the basket most of the time. His volume is great, but I do want to keep seeing his efficiency go up. Right now, he's converting on 59% of these shots. Usually, Black is getting to the rack with power and speed. He's a tank of a ball handler, and we see that here as he just blazes past Cason Wallace, who's a pretty good defender in his own right. Black is deceivingly strong, and he leverages that really effectively. Maybe he has room to get more toned, but I'm not worried about him from an athletic standpoint. The 19-year-old really embraces playing through contact. Because of this physicality, Black can finish from awkward angles, and he's valuable both in the half court and in transition. Right here, he uses the screen to turn the corner and throws down the big dunk. He has 24 of these this season. But in that game, Black also showed that he can blow past his defender with the crisp float over and then finish left high off the glass. With regards to his finishing, it's not too often that I mention this about a prospect, but I would be remiss to not touch on Black's ability to draw fouls. He's had an alright scoring season, really he stuffed the stat sheet in so many other ways, but the Arkansas man's efficiency takes a big leap when you take his trips to the charity stripe into account. Black has already shot 179 free throws. He gets to the free throw line 5 times a game, and he's drawing these fouls at a really high rate. And even though he's not the most graceful at times, he's definitely effective. There's some improvement points, more on those in a bit, but I'm always impressed by how relentless Black is attacking the rim and his capacity to keep making multiple efforts over the course of a game. Even after getting fouled and taking spills, Black always keeps going. He's able to drive both left and right, and like I said, he's going to be harder to stop in the future. Getting into these areas of growth for Black, the most straightforward thing to call attention to is that you're hoping his efficiency eventually shoots up to match his volume and tenacity. Shooting 59% at the rim is disappointing. Black can be a wrecking ball once he's in the paint, but it's also true, he lacks a degree of explosiveness. Ultimately, that makes him somewhat of a below-the-rim athlete. Even though he's 6'7" and he does show the benefits of that, he doesn't actually play bigger than 6'7", if that makes sense. For me, the biggest issue is that Black is unable to really change directions on a whim. Black cannot maneuver in short spaces right now, which is why I keep going back to the question of spacing, how he barely had it at Arkansas, and how it will benefit him in the NBA. That being said, this will keep being an issue if it's not addressed. Black lacks flexibility and fluidity. He can beat his man, but then he doesn't really have the creativity or finesse to finish if he's met with bodies in the paint. His shots are still prone to getting altered a lot of the time since he has to go through his defender rather than being able to get over or around them. Black is pretty strictly a straight line driver right now, and he badly needs to add some wiggle to his game. If anything, I'd love to see him add a more consistent in-between game, something like this floater. However, the Arkansas playmaker doesn't seem to have this shot in his bag just yet. He tries it, which is encouraging, but Black cannot nail this floater or runner using either hand right now. Since we're first breaking down what makes Black a unique prospect, we should move to his passing. Black is a great facilitator, and again, it's his size and playmaking package that makes him such an appealing option for today's NBA. Even though Arkansas lacked three-point shooting, Black was still making some league-level reads coming out of pick and rolls. Usually, I describe Black as a connector because he just keeps things ticking all over the floor. With the ball in his hands, he usually prefers going right, and then he just does a multitude of things well. The first one that stands out is Black's patience. He never really gets rushed, and he understands how to time his feeds to match with when his big rolls to the basket. We see that here with this pocket pass as he gets the screen higher up the floor than usual for college. Black understands that the pick and roll is a cat and mouse game. Some of his deliveries might not exactly jump off the screen, but trust me, Black is pretty skilled at manipulating defenses. In this clip versus Kentucky, he gets the screen to go right, then Black slows down to attract both the big guarding the screen, as well as his initial defender, and he fires the pass over the top with great pace. This pass, against a slightly different coverage, is great too. Black bumps to create separation, spins off, and then hits the roller with precision. On top of that, I think that some of his reads will get better usage in the NBA. Like for instance, I think this skip pass off the live dribble probably leads to a 3 in some way. As a freshman, Black has 140 assists to 107 turnovers. That's improvable, but it shows the load he's taking on, and it's only fair that he has growing pains at such an early stage of his development. We'll get into how Black's shooting pans out here in a bit, but the Razorbacks connector also adds value all over the place in the half court with his playmaking. Black is a capable passer off the live dribble who can fizz passes through tight spaces, and I'm really encouraged by the weight and technique on some of these reads. Like with everywhere else on the floor, Black's combination of size, creativity, and handle is just so hard to contain, no matter how it shows up. The fact that he's able to use his tools to add value in so many ways is great, and we will get into how it can offset what he has to keep working on. Looking at the NBA, Black has shown flashes of just about any type of playmaking that you might ask from him. We really got into his pick and rolls, which are the staple of most offenses in the league these days, but I also want to focus on what type of players Black finds. When he's using ball screens, Black is mostly setting up his bigs. I think the use of that is pretty clear, so I'm not going to get into it that much. But he's also good at rewarding his teammates who are active off the ball. Black is unselfish and aware with how he scans the floor and finds pieces on the move. Finally, he's equally able to generate threes. I have some concerns about how these reps translate once Black steps up to the NBA, but those relate to his shooting rather than his facilitating. Looking at these clips in more of a vacuum then, I like how Black is forceful getting into the paint and collapsing defenses before he makes the right read. Very quickly, and as you might have predicted, the Duncanville, Texas native is also a threat in transition. Black can get his team from point A to point B pretty quickly. He plays with his head up, can push the pace, and I'd expect to see these types of passes even more once he's playing at a higher speed. Going forward, the biggest thing that I want is to see Black cut down on these careless, avoidable turnovers. It feels to me that he has a lot of these unforced errors where he just switches off for a second and throws a loose pass or something along those lines that ends in a turnover. Then, he also has some work to do with his placement. Generally speaking, Black usually makes the right read, but his execution has room for growth. Here, for example, I like the process. Maybe Jordan Walsh could have faded a bit to his right, but I also feel like the delivery could have been better. Or here, Black does everything right, but then I think he could set up his teammate up with an easier look with slightly better accuracy. So of course, Black's playmaking is great because it leads to easy looks for his teammates in an offense that sometimes badly needs them. But it's also really important because it offsets his personal lack of self-creation and scoring. I feel comfortable with how Black gets his at the rim, but I have major question marks from everywhere else. He takes more threes than two-point jumpers, so let's start there. In some ways, this might be Black's swing skill. He'll be reliant on his outside shot to some sort of important extent because his impact right now hinges on finishing and playmaking. For those things to exist, lanes need to be there. Black's numbers are not terrible, he makes 30% of his threes, and his volume is low, but not horrifically so. Still, he's pretty much a non-shooter right now by NBA standards, at the very least, off the dribble. Black is not a non-willing shooter, which I do appreciate, but I also think he might as well just focus on converting the easier looks he gets before really branching out his three-point game. Otherwise, defenses will soon learn they can simply not close out on him and dare him to shoot. For a player with Black's unusual skill set that doesn't really have any clear matches, that poses a huge issue right now. He can only handle consistently in a straight line. He's not that creative or explosive putting together dribble combinations because his handle is fairly basic, and he also lacks the ability to get into his own jumper. Right here, Black brings the ball up, he snakes the pick and roll, but then I wish he would be able to get into the step back pull up too. Versus Auburn, I wish Black was just shameless and let the step back three fly, even if he missed. So how can Black offset his lack of scoring besides those easy threes? Well, we've seen this season that Black can also be useful off the ball. Let's not forget, he's a pretty good athlete who can get up in space off 2 feet. And because of his force and acceleration, you can leverage Black's tools to use them as a cutter. We've seen Arkansas do that, and I'd expect to see this more if Black plays less of a primary ball handling role on his next team. The Razorbacks connector is a below the rim athlete in traffic, but you can use him as a play finisher when he's on the move. Finally, Black can pitch in on the offensive glass. This hasn't shown up in a massive way, Black gets just 1 offensive rebound per game, but I think it's appeared enough, and it also speaks to this athleticism. 10% of Black's makes at the rim are off putbacks. He has 13 of those, which is actually the same as his teammate Jordan Walsh. Overall, I think Walsh is a better athlete, but my point here is that Black's odd frame and finishing woes that come with his lack of wiggle discredit his strength, which helps him play through contact, his motor, his speed, and his timing. I've been slightly underwhelmed by Anthony Black's defense this season. He's shown some decent flashes, but before we get into those, I think a fair assessment is that his potential is much more on paper than in practice right now. At this stage, he's giving up blow-bys way too often. Black is big for a guard at 6'7", but that doesn't matter on defense if he's never in a position to make use of it. The Arkansas prospect is heavy on his feet, and he plays too upright on this end of the floor. This means that Black, like on offense, cannot quickly change directions, so he's on his heels a lot of the time, and he's also unable to recover. Black concedes drives far too easily, and this really has to stop. But for me, what really cannot continue are these undisciplined, sort of lazy reach-in fouls. It's not like Black gets in foul trouble or anything, but I just want to see better effort. The same motor that shows up on offense with his all-around contributions doesn't appear on defense, and it's been frustrating to watch. He's also prone to falling asleep off the ball too much for my liking. Like here, he's late twice. First when he's trailing, and then he's late to his box out, which ends up in free throws for the other team. Still, the potential is evident, it just has to be tapped into a lot more. Black has actually accumulated a pretty solid number of steals, he's active in the passing lanes, and his skill set allows him to both get the steal and then score down the other end. I want to see Black use his size and strength more often. Truth be told, I like the Arkansas connector more when he's roaming off the ball and coming in to help. Black's timing is one of his best skills not just on offense, but it can also be a two-way tool. Going forward, I'd love to see him expand on these flashes as a rim protector. Black hasn't been used around this area of the floor too often, but being able to rack up blocks is always a huge bonus for big ball handlers. He has 22 of them in 35 games. As for his versatility, I do think it's more theoretical than real right now, but since we have the future in mind, it's encouraging to think about how Black has looked against different sorts of players while at Arkansas. He's someone you can employ to pressure the point of attack with his size and point guard instincts. Then Black also has the size of a wing at 6'7", so you can put him on those rangier 2s and 3s. Going forward, I would love to see Black grow into an even switchier defender. I feel like the tools are there. We see them in dispossession. Black starts off by picking up full court, but by the end, he switched on to the big, he makes the rotation, and gets the deflection at the basket. Anthony Black is one of the more unorthodox prospects in the 2023 draft. He really has my attention because I love those big ball handling types who are really creative facilitators, who are unselfish, who can pitch in on the glass, and generally speaking, just do things all over the floor that help you win. However, defensively, and really as a scorer from everywhere else, I do have my concerns. Ideally, you want Black to be one of these, really versatile prospects who can kind of do it all, but the problem is right now, he cannot create his own jumper. He can't really drill wide open threes at a consistent level. That, for one, is going to be a big improvement point. And then on defense, there's a lot of tools that you can be convinced by. Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. But Black really needs to improve his motor. He needs to improve his awareness. And right now, I will say, his theoretical multi-positional potential is very much an idea and not a reality. As always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, make sure to leave a comment, tell me what you thought, and if you enjoy the channel, if you want to watch more content like this, make sure to subscribe. Take care, and I'll catch you guys next time.